Hey everyone. So in order to use Dialogic in our project, we need to go to GitHub. This will be linked down in the description. Click on code, then download zip. Once that's finished downloading, extract it, go into the add-ons, open up your project, then drag the add-ons folder to your project. Let that import, go to project settings, plugins, enable Dialogic, give it a few seconds, and close. Now you should see Dialogic tab right at the top. Let's create a new timeline. Name it timeline or whatever you want. Click save. And then this will be our main text box. We also have characters here. We can add in our own characters with their images and names. Glossary. So if you want a player to hover above a word and then give the definition. Styles, variables, and settings. But let's stick timeline for now. Let's add in some text. So let's give us some choices. We'll say add a number choice. Don't talk to me. And then we can test it out. Hello, don't talk to me, how's your day? And that's it. We can continue the conversation by just clicking adding enough text, bring it down here, saying bye. And click play timeline. Now, how do we run this in code? I've created a simple scene here. I've added a button and a signal. And it's very simple. You just say dialogic.start. And then you type in the name of your timeline. For me, I just named it timeline. So now, hopefully, if I start the scene, click on the button. Hello. Don't talk to me. Bye. There are two main signal types in Dialogic. The first is when a timeline ends, and the second is when we emit a signal ourselves. Now, onto the first. The way we do this is by saying dialogic.timelineEnded.connect. Ended is our function that we've made here. Function ended. Dialogic.timelineDisconnect. So once we've triggered it, we want it to disconnect and we want it to print. Let's test this out. And we got our signal here. The second way is if we want to emit a signal before the timeline ends or a specific signal. The way we do that is by going to Dialogic, emit signal, type the signal name. I'm just going to type test for this demonstration. Go back to our script. We want to connect the signal event to another function. So Dialogic signal was connected to our function. Argument string. So if argument is equal to test, which is the name of our argument, print signal received. And that will print before the timeline ends. As you can see here. Today we're going to be discussing the characters tab in Dialogic. So to start off, let's make a new character. Let's just name her character. And we have a few sections here. So we have portraits. So this is where we're going to add in our characters' images, their different poses, different facial expressions. Let's do that now. You can say neutral or say default. And then the image, I already brought in my ones. We have neutral. Let's add in another one. Say angry. And then I got my angry pose here. Obviously, we have the character name, which we wrote. We have display name, what the character displayed as, the color, nickname, description. Obviously, we have portraits. We can select the default, the main scale, the main offset, main mirror, whether we should mirror the image or not. Style, we'll get into that in a later episode. Typing sound, so if you want a specific sound for your character when they're speaking. So now, how do we add this character to our scene? Well, we can add a character by pressing this button. Let's drag her to the top, so she joins in, character, and let's just give her default. And we have about 5 positions to choose from. But let's play this and test it out. So we press the button. There you go, she joins in position 1. Hello, I'm angry. There we go. So that's position 1. Let's say we want her in the middle. And she's in the middle. Well, let's say we want her more close to the screen. How do we do that? So we go back to the character. We can change the default here, or we can change it here. So for example, I want her closer. So let's say scale 150. And then we can offset her by on the X or the Y axis. So I want her to be, let's say, more zoomed in and then a bit down. So we just see like from her knees to the head. See what that does. It's a bit of trial and error, but she's still too high. Let's just say 800. Test that out. And there you go. I have her in a nice position. So let's say we want to change her facial expression. We can add another character. Let's go, so just say I'm angry. Not join. Update her. Change portrait to angry. And we can also change her position to, let's say, position 1. And we have different animations here. Also, when she joins, we have different animations. So if we press this drop down here, we can change the animation to fade in, slide in from right, left. Test it out. So she bounced in. The glossary is essentially a dictionary for your words. So to start off, let's add a new glossary. I'm going to name it glossary and save. And then over here is where we add our words. So new entry, let's call this, say hello. Alternatives is like synonyms for your words. So you can say howdy, comma, let's separate it. Hi. We can check case sensitivity here. If we don't want it, we also have the default over here. We can change title, description, color. So for the title, we can say a greeting. Description, let's say a greeting again. We have this extra tab here, which will be displayed underneath your description. So just as an example, I'm going to write this as extra. We have it enabled, and then you can change the color here. So let's just test this out. So the way this works is when you write down this word or any of the alternatives in your timeline, it will highlight it within your chosen color, and then it will display it. So we go to our timeline, I've written hello, or I can also say howdy. And then when we test it out, hello or howdy, and then when we hover above it, it'll tell us the greeting. So we have our title at the top, we have the description, and then we have the extra bit at the bottom. You can also import a glossary if you've made one previously in a different file, for example, or your previous game, or you can also delete the one you have here. Same with the entries. You can add a new entry or you can delete it here, obviously search. There are 3 main styles already built into Dialogic. First one is your standard visual novel style. The second one is where you have a picture within the text box. And the third and final one is when you have a speech bubble pop up. So this would be good for like RPGs, or when you want the speech bubble to follow the character. In order to create a style, we click on the plus here. We can make our own custom style, inherited, or we have, like I said, 3 pre-made ones. We have a speaker text box with the picture. We have a text bubble, which is good for like top-down RPG kind of things. And we also have the visual novel style. So let's just make this one. And you can see here, we have all of our different settings. We can change the color, we can change the size of the text, change the box color, the name label, indicating sounds, layers, etc., etc. Once you've customized this to your liking, let's go back to the character. Just change the style in the style drop-down to your selected style. Now, in terms of the code, very simple. For the standard visual novel style, just start the timeline and it will play. For the bubble, it's a bit more complicated. So we need to add a variable, start the dialogic. We need to register the character and then load the text in a position. So for this example, I've used a marker 2D, and bubble is just a character I made. And this is my bubble character. So I'll load that timeline in this position. So if I play the game now, this is bubble text. And then if I move my marker, say over here, and then we play the game, that's where the text bubble will pop up from. Make sure you're only using one style type for your game. What I mean by that is either use the visual novel style, the picture style, or the bubble style, as using different ones in your game could cause it to crash. This plugin is still in alpha. For example, I have the bubble as my default one, but if I change it to the visual novel by pressing this button here, and when I play the game, if I try and click on the bubble one, it completely crashes the game. In the description, I've linked a video of a more in-depth breakdown of how to customize the styles. Feel free to check it out. The way you add a variable is by clicking this button here, add new variable. I'm just going to name it variable. Now, your variable can be a string or a float or even an expression. But for today's example, we're going to go with a float. So I'm going to put the number 5. Then we go back to our timeline, and then we can add a condition here. So if variable that we just made is equal to or greater than, maybe we have a float. So let's say 5. So if variable is equal to or greater than 5, we can have the character say I5. Let's test this out. There you go. And let's change the variable that down to 0. And then she won't say anything. See? Now, we can also add a choice. And the choice can be choice 1. We can add another choice, so choice 2. And all of this will only appear if variable is above 5. So right now, nothing will appear. Then let's put the variable back up to 5. And then we have our 2 choices. Now, we can also, underneath our choices, add some more logic. So we can set a variable. So set our variable to be or itself plus minus multiplied, let's say plus 5. And then for choice 2, we're going to set variable to be itself minus 5. This number over here represents the variable. I'll show you how to do that later. So choice 1 plus 5. Choice 2 minus 5. Now, how do we access our variables via code? So this is how you do it. We just write dialogic.var in caps dot the name of your variable. So I called my variable for the demonstration. We could even add 5 to the variable using a script. See, and now it equals 10 because we added that over here, and it equals 5. Today we're going to be discussing settings. So color palette here, if I change orange here to white under music, it will just change the color here. Whereas if I go back here and change it back to orange, But add in another music one, it will change it to orange. Pretty simple. So at the end of your timeline, or at the end of your character speaking, it just deletes it right now, but you can choose to hide it or keep it. So this will change depending on what you want for your game. The extension folder, extensions creator, I'm going to ignore that. You can have your timers run in the physics process. You can change the order. So for example, I can put our up or audio up. And then if we go back to our timeline, see over here, it will rearrange the order. But again, this might not work because it's an alpha. We have our text settings here, so you can change the default lettering speed, so how quickly it types, the default action, etc., etc. If you put your mouse above all these eyes, it will tell you specifically what it does. Portraits, you can set default scene and then default animations. You can have it be autofocus on first choice when there's multiple choices or not. Saving, we'll get into this in a later video. Again, you can enable chat history so your players can see the history log. Translations, we'll get into this in a later video as well. And over here in the module, you can adjust the defaults for literally every node that you can think of. So you can adjust the fade, the default volume, the default bus, background events. These are all sound events here, even the call events, auto load, etc., etc. And over here in Converter, you can convert. Let's say you're working on 3.5 and you're using the default version of Dialogic. You can convert your files into the newer version.
Today we're going to be discussing saving and loading within Dialogic. Start off with the code. It's pretty simple. For the saving, we write dialogic.save, and then we can write in which slot that we want to save to or give it a name. Alternatively, if we just had one save location, we could keep this empty and this will save to the default location. Same thing for load. We'll just say dialogic.save.load, and if we keep it empty, this will load the default. Now, let's say we wanted to save and load the location of our character or the scene that we're in. What we would do is first, within Dialogic, we would create a variable, a location variable. And then we would go back into our script. When we save, we get our current location. We get the name of our current location. And then in our load, we would get the tree and change scene to file. So we get the res plus the string location or wherever it is saved, .tscn. And that way, when you click load, it will load in. If we look at the documentation here, we can see that we can also take a thumbnail screenshot and save any extra information. I will not be going over that in today's video, but feel free to have a look at documentation. Today we're going to be discussing translations. What you want to do first, go to settings and come down here to translations. We need to make a new folder to hold all of our translations. So just click the button here, make a new folder, create a new folder. And that's where we're going to put all of our translations. Now we have a couple options we can do. We can do per file or per type. I'm just going to keep it per file for now. And then the upper location inside translation folder. Then we want to update CSV files. And that will create a bunch of files in our translation folder here. It will create CSV files. So you can ignore these .translation files and ignore the key one. Let's open our CSV. I just clicked Notepad. I've already translated mine into English and Italian. English is the default, Italian is the one we translate to. So the way we do that is, so we need to identify our language using the short keys. So EN is for English, and then I did IT for Italian. So my text was, hey, how are you? And then we want to separate it out by a comma and then do the text that we want to translate to. So, hey, how are you is English, and then Ehi come stai is Italian. And then we want to save this and then close it. Then what we want to do, click on collect translations, and this will collect all the translations Nice. Added translation files, total 3. Then if I go into my timeline, I can click play timeline and just to test it out. Hey, how are you? I'm good. So that's English. I go into my testing locale here. We can change our default, or we can just change our testing. That's the one we're testing, right? And then I can play my timeline again. And it should say it in Italian. Yeah. And also, if you don't translate something, it will revert back to default.
Today we're going to be discussing custom styles. First, let's create a new style. I'm going to choose pre-made style and visual novel style. I'm going to call this one test style. Expand this out a bit. And this is where we're going to be doing all of our editing. Now, the next step is to right click in our file browser, right click and new resource. And what we want to do is create a style box texture. I'm going to call it test style box. Double click on it. And I've already created my own custom image. So I'm going to just drag that into the texture box. And then I'm going to drag my test style box into the box tab and into the panel. So that will change this to this. So let's test it out. Okay, if you notice that there's nothing here, that means we need to restart or save. Okay, make sure you're saving after each time you change something. Our next step is to change the color. So we need to uncheck use global and then change the custom to white. So this is modulation. And when we change it to white, it allows our own colors to come through, but the size isn't correct. So next we can change the size over here. My one needs to be 1000 by 300. And this can be whatever your text box size is. Okay, now the size is good, but the text isn't inside the box. So now we can come down here into content margins. I need to bring mine more inwards. So I'm going to do 50 and then top 80, bottom 80, and on the right 50, save. And test again. Okay, so I need to bring it more inwards on the left and right, and I can put it up a bit. So I can do 70 and then 60 on the left and right. And let's test it out again. Oh, don't forget to save and then test. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Today we're going to be discussing custom centered choices. So after you've made your style, come down here to center choices. Let's go into the boxes panel. And what you can do, if you click on this pen, this will open up the boxes, but we want our own custom one. But if you want to, you can also just change the colors here. So first we have to right click in our file system, new resource, and we want to make a style box texture. I'm going to call mine test choices box and save that. Next, what we want to do is take our test choices box and drag it into the style box normal. This will replace it, and then you can double click on your test choices box. I've already made my own custom center choices. So I'm going to drag that image into the texture, and then that replaces it. So let's test that out. Okay, make sure you're saving and then test. There we go. But you'll notice when we hover above it, it still reverts back to the default. So you'll need a custom image for each one. So one for normal, one for hover, and one for focus, just like any other button. Next, what we need to do is set the custom minimum size. So I'm going to do for my X 300 and then for the y 100, and then test that out. Okay, that looks fine to me, but now I just need to offset it to make it go up. So on the y, I'm going to do minus 100, and then that should fix the issue. There we go. Now we have our custom boxes, and if you want to remove this selected image, you can just edit this. You can come down here to border width and set it to 0. Hello class, today we're going to be discussing text input in Dialogic. So step 1, we want to go to our variables tab, create a new variable by pressing this button. I just called my name and leave it as a string. Step 2, go into your timeline, make a new timeline if you have it, and add in a text. So I wrote down what is your name, and then we want to do a text input. We want to select our variable, and this is going to be the text above it. So I'm going to say insert name, a placeholder. So we can just say name, and we can also have a default if we want, like this will be already inside. So let's say, so let's test this out. Hi, what is your name? Let's see, and it's already has lazy inside. If I get rid of it, then it will put the placeholder, which is name. So if instead of name, let's say do Aslan, and then you confirm. But we don't know what our name is or anything like that. So what we can do is next add another text. And I wrote down all your name is, and then I changed the color to red. When you put things in squiggly brackets, this accesses the variable. Okay, so this is our variable that accesses. And then I'm reverting the color back to default. And then I'm also going to throw in a save in there. So I'm saving this name. Okay, so let's test that again. What is your name? I'm going to say Lazy Games this time. Oh, your name is Lazy Games. And that's it. Today we're going to be discussing animated portraits for our characters, just like we have here. Step 1, go into your Dialogic. Let's create a new character. I'm just going to call it character for this demo. Now create a new portrait. I'm just going to call this name. It doesn't really matter what it's called. And then in our default portrait scene, we want to do a layered portrait. Now click customize the scene, and then it's click save or give it a name, whatever you want. And let's go here. This will give us a new scene for our character, and this already has some stuff built in for us. So our layer 1 will be our base for our character. So this will be the character without any clothes, with just the default character. Then we have groups and layer 1, layer 2, and these are 2D sprites. Now I've already built a character, so to show you an example. So I've renamed it to base. Okay, and this is the character without clothes, or in my instance, it's just an empty PNG with nothing in it, just so Dialogic can build out a map of it. Then I have a node 2D, which for my mood. So I got happy and I got sad. All right. And then I have another node 2D for normal or casual. And anything I want animated needs to have an animation player as a child of the sprite 2D. The sad has an animation player, plays sad animation. We have the happy animation playing. Oh, and now we have the sad animation playing. Okay, pretty simple to do. Now, how do we edit this within the engine? Let's go into Dialogic. Inside of our timeline, when we add in a character or when we update a character, we need to go into the advanced options. Then in the extra data, we have 3 options. Okay, we can set, we can show, or we can hide. And then we have to write set mood, and then we put /happy. So this references the mood, which is no2d, and then happy. So when we set something, it turns off every other thing within that branch. So if I want to change her clothes, I would do set clothes normal or set clothes casual, and I would change all of her clothes from normal to casual. And you can build this out. So for each hairstyle, for each shirt, for each trouser, it's up to you. It's totally customizable. Okay, and just show you from here. Hide mood happy and show mood sad. Now the last thing we can do for performance purposes. So I've created a script here just for the animation to play. If happy is visible, animation play happy, else and stop. And the same thing for sad. I set it to play when it's visible, else it stop. So these are all triggered based on signals given off by the animation player or the write2d. You don't need to do this. This is just for performance purposes. You can also just click on the animation player and have it autoplay. So it will always be playing in the background if performance is an issue. But that's it for today's video.